Varric had lived for 300 years. In all that time, he had never held a weapon. His people, the Velshanti, had left violence behind long ago. They believed that war was a sickness, something that lesser species suffered from before they grew wise. Varric had always been proud of this. He thought his people had evolved beyond the need for blood. Now, standing on the bridge of the refugee ship Quiet Dawn, he wondered if that pride had been foolish. The Korvathi were coming. Everyone knew it. The insectoid empire had already destroyed 12 worlds in their path. They did not negotiate. They did not take prisoners. They simply killed everything that was not them, and they moved on to the next system. 40,000 Velshanti refugees huddled in the ships behind them, waiting for rescue that might never come. "Contact on long-range sensors," said the navigation officer. His voice was shaking. Varric closed his 4 eyes and reached out with his mind. His people were telepaths, able to sense emotions across great distances. What he felt from the approaching ships was cold, empty, and hungry. The Korvathi thought of nothing but the kill. Then he felt something else. Something coming from the opposite direction. It was loud, chaotic, full of strange emotions he could not name. It felt like fire and laughter, and something that might have been madness. "More contacts," the navigation officer said. "Coming from the Terran sector. Humans." Varric had heard stories about them. They were a young species, barely 200 years into space travel. The Galactic Council considered them primitive and dangerous. They still ate meat. They still fought wars among themselves. They had not evolved beyond violence. Some said they never would. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace in a flash of light. 60 ships, led by a massive carrier called the Defiant Spirit. Compared to the elegant curves of Velshanti vessels, the human ships looked rough and ugly. They were covered in armor, plating, and weapon mounts. They looked like they had been built for one purpose only. A communication channel opened. A human face appeared on the view screen. She was an older female with gray hair and hard eyes. "This is Admiral Claire Hutchinson of the Terran Defense Fleet," she said. "We received your distress call. We are here to help." The Velshanti captain stammered out a reply, thanking the humans for coming. Varric watched the Admiral's face. She did not smile. She did not offer comfort. She simply nodded and said, "Get your civilians ready to move. We will hold the line." The channel closed. Varric felt a chill run through him. The humans had not asked about the odds. They had not asked how many enemies were coming. They had simply said they would hold. 2 days later, Varric was assigned as a liaison officer to the human Marines stationed aboard Quiet Dawn. He did not want the job. The thought of working closely with humans made him uncomfortable. But someone had to do it. And he was the only officer who had studied their language. He met them in the cargo bay they had turned into a barracks. There were 30 of them, men and women in gray armor, checking weapons and talking loudly. The smell of their sweat and their food filled the air. Varric tried not to show his disgust. A stocky male with scars on his face walked up to him. He had short brown hair and a smile that did not reach his eyes. "You must be our alien buddy," the man said. "I'm Sergeant Danny Kowalski. Welcome to the party." Varric introduced himself, struggling to pronounce the human greeting correctly. Danny laughed and slapped him on the shoulder. The force of it nearly knocked Varric off his feet. "Don't worry, Bug Eyes. You'll get used to us." Bug Eyes. The humans had already given him a nickname. He was not sure if he should be offended. A female officer approached them. She was smaller than Danny, with dark hair pulled back tight and calm brown eyes. She moved like water, smooth and controlled. "Lieutenant Katie Moreno," she said. "I command this unit. We appreciate your help, Varric. I know this must be difficult for your people." Her voice was soft, but there was something underneath it. Something hard, like metal wrapped in silk. Varric nodded politely. Over the next 2 days, he observed the humans closely. What he saw disturbed him. They trained constantly. Even when they were not on duty, they exercised, sparred, and practiced with their weapons. They seemed to enjoy it. Danny Kowalski would laugh while wrestling with his squad mates, slamming them to the ground with brutal efficiency. A young female pilot named Brooke Delgado did target practice until her hands were raw. They talked about death like it was a game. They told jokes about battles they had survived, about friends they had lost. They did not seem sad. They did not seem afraid. They seemed almost eager. One night, Varric Thal asked Katie Moreno about this. "Does it not frighten you?" he said. "What is coming?" Katie looked at him for a long moment. Then she smiled, just a little. "My grandfather fought in a war on Earth," she said. "He lost his leg, lost most of his friends. When I was little, I asked him why he did it, why he kept fighting when it hurt so much. What did he say? He said the only thing worse than fighting is letting someone hurt the people you love." She walked away, leaving Varric Thal alone with his thoughts. The next morning, the briefing came. The Korvathi fleet had been spotted. 200 warships, heading straight for them. The Allied fleet had only 60 ships. Every tactical model said they would lose. When Admiral Hutchinson finished speaking, there was silence on the bridge. The Velshanti officers looked terrified. The humans looked bored. Danny Kowalski leaned over to Varric Thal and grinned. 200 ships, he said. Good, more targets. That night, Varric Thal could not sleep. He walked through the corridors of the quiet dawn, trying to calm his racing thoughts. He passed the human barracks and stopped. The Marines were gathered in a circle. They were holding hands, their heads bowed. Danny Kowalski was speaking, his voice low and serious. Varric Thal could not hear the words, but he could feel the emotion behind them. Loyalty. Love. A bond stronger than blood. When they finished, they raised their heads and cheered. Then they went back to preparing for war, laughing and joking like nothing had happened. Varric Thal returned to his quarters and sat in the darkness. He had studied many species in his long life. He had seen warriors and predators and killers of all kinds. But he had never seen anything like this. He was not sure if he was watching heroes or monsters. He was afraid he might find out soon. The Korvathi came out of hyperspace like a swarm of insects. 200 ships, black and jagged, spreading across the stars like a disease. Varric Thal stood on the bridge of the quiet dawn and felt his heart stop beating. He had seen images of the enemy before. He had read reports about their attacks. But nothing had prepared him for this. The ships were alive with hatred. Even from this distance, his telepathic senses were overwhelmed by the cold hunger pouring from them. "All hands to battle stations," the captain announced. His voice cracked. The human carrier Defiant Spirit moved to the front of the Allied formation. Small fighters began launching from its bays, dozens of them, streaking toward the enemy like angry fireflies. Varric Thal watched them go. Each one carried a single pilot. Each one was racing toward almost certain death. He saw Brooke Delgado climb into her fighter in the hangar below. She was young, maybe 23 years old. She had freckles on her nose and a gap between her front teeth. When she noticed Varric Thal watching from the observation window, she waved at him and grinned. Then she sealed her cockpit and launched into the void. The battle began. Varric Thal had never experienced anything like it. The noise, the shaking, the screaming of metal and the flash of weapons. The quiet dawn rocked as enemy fire struck its shields. Officers shouted orders. Alarms blared, and the humans fought. He watched on the tactical display as the human fighters dove into the enemy formation. They were outnumbered 10-1. But they did not hesitate. They twisted and spun through the chaos, firing at anything that moved. One by one, they began to fall. Varric Thal saw the lights on the display go dark as pilots died. Brooke Delgado's fighter took a hit. Her wing was torn away. For a moment, Varric Thal thought she was finished. Then, she somehow stabilized her spinning craft and kept flying, kept fighting. She destroyed 2 more enemy ships before her weapons ran out. Then she rammed her fighter into a third. The explosion filled the view screen. Varric Thal felt his throat tighten. But Brooke was not dead. Somehow, impossibly, she had ejected at the last second. Her escape pod tumbled through the debris, still broadcasting a distress signal. Still alive. The humans were insane. All of them. The battle raged for hours. Allied ships were torn apart. Escape pods were hunted down and destroyed. The Korvathi showed no mercy. They never did. But the humans held the line. Every time the enemy pushed forward, they pushed back. Every time a ship fell, another took its place. They were losing. Slowly. But they refused to break. Then the alarms changed. A new warning. High and urgent. "Hull breach on deck 7, someone shouted. "We have boarders." The Korvathi had sent landing pods. They were inside the ship. Varekthal felt true fear for the first time in his life. The Korvathi warriors were nightmares. 8 legs. Razor-sharp mandibles. Bodies covered in natural armor. They were twice the size of humans and 3 times as strong. They killed with their claws, their teeth, their acid spit. They were monsters. Lieutenant Katie Moreno's voice came over the intercom, calm and steady. "All Marines, converge on deck 7. We have guests." Varekthal followed the Marines toward the breach. He did not know why. He had no weapon. He had no training. But something pulled him forward. He needed to see. The corridor outside the breach was chaos. Emergency lights flashed red. Smoke filled the air. And there, at the end of the hallway, Varekthal saw them for the first time. The Korvathi were worse than the images. They moved like spiders, fast and jerky. Their eyes were black and empty. Their mandibles clicked as they advanced, dripping with something that might have been saliva or venom. There were at least 20 of them. The Marines opened fire. The sound was deafening. Varekthal pressed himself against the wall, his hands over his ears, watching in horror. The Korvathi charged. The first wave fell to gunfire, but more came behind them, always more. They climbed over their own dead, reaching for the humans with their clawed limbs. Danny Kowalski stood at the front of the line. He was screaming something, but Varekthal could not hear the words over the noise. His rifle flashed again and again. Then it jammed. Without hesitation, Danny dropped the rifle and pulled out a knife. A knife, against armored aliens twice his size. The first Korvathi reached him. Danny ducked under its claws and drove the knife into the soft joint beneath its arm. The creature screamed. Danny twisted the blade and pulled it free. Then he stabbed again, and again. The alien fell. Another took its place. Danny killed that one too. Beside him, a Marine named Tyler Vance was surrounded. 3 Korvathi had backed him against a railing. He had no room to retreat. No way to escape. Tyler looked at the aliens. Then he looked down at the engine room below. Then he smiled. He grabbed the nearest Korvathi and threw himself over the railing. They fell together, human and alien, tumbling into the machinery below. Tyler was still shooting as he fell. The impact killed them both instantly. The remaining Korvathi hesitated. Just for a moment. But a moment was enough. The Marines pushed forward. Katie Moreno led the charge, her pistol firing with perfect accuracy. Danny Kowalski followed, his knife red with alien blood. They drove the boarders back toward the breach. They killed every single one. When it was over, Varekthal stood among the bodies. Human and alien blood mixed on the floor. The smell was terrible. The silence was worse. Danny Kowalski walked over to Tyler Vance's body, which had been brought up from the engine room. He knelt beside his fallen friend and put a hand on his chest. "Stupid idiot," Danny said softly. "I told you to stop showing off." Then he stood up, wiped the blood from his knife, and smiled at Varekthal. "You okay there, Bug Eyes? You look a little green." Varekthal could not speak. He could not move. He just stared at Danny Kowalski, at the blood on his hands, at the easy smile on his face. He had watched this human kill 3 armored warriors with a knife. He had watched another human fall to his death while laughing. He had seen things he would never be able to forget. The boarding party was gone. The immediate threat was over. But Varekthal realized something terrible. He was no longer afraid of the Korvathi. He was afraid of the humans. 3 days passed after the first battle. The Allied fleet had survived. Barely. 12 ships lost. Hundreds dead. The quiet dawn limped toward the moon of Thessar Prime for repairs, its hull scarred with burns and holes. Varekthal could not sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Tyler Vance falling. He saw Danny Kowalski's knife sliding into alien flesh. He saw Brooke Delgado's fighter exploding in the void. He tried to meditate. His people had practiced the art of inner peace for 10,000 years. Varekthal had always found comfort in the silence of his own mind. But now, when he searched for calm, he found only chaos. He walked the corridors at night, avoiding other crew members, trying to understand what he had witnessed. On the fourth night, he found Lieutenant Katie Moreno sitting alone in the observation bay. She was looking at the stars, her injured shoulder wrapped in bandages. She did not turn when he entered. "Cannot sleep either?" she asked. Varekthal sat down beside her. For a long time, neither of them spoke. "I do not understand your people," he finally said. "I have studied many species. I have seen predators and warriors. But humans are different. You fight like you want to die. But you do not. You want to live. Both things are true at the same time. How is this possible?" Katie was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Do you know what fear is?" Varekthal? Of course. Fear is the response to danger. It tells us to run, to hide, to survive. That is what fear does, Katie said. Varekthal thought about this. "I do not know." "Neither do we," Katie said. "Humans have been asking that question for thousands of years. We never found an answer, so we decided to do something else instead." "What?" Katie turned to look at him. Her eyes were soft but strong. "We decided to use it," she said. "Fear tells us we might die. It reminds us that life matters. So we take that fear, and we turn it into fuel. We let it burn inside us. We let it make us faster, stronger, more alive than we have ever been. That is what you see when humans fight. Not a wish for death. A celebration of life." Varekthal did not fully understand, but something in her words touched him. The next day, the humans held a memorial service for their fallen. Varekthal was invited to attend. He almost refused, but something made him go. He expected tears. He expected anger. He expected the heavy silence of grief. Instead, he found laughter. The Marines had gathered in the cargo bay. Someone had brought bottles of a brown liquid they called whiskey. They passed it around, drinking and talking loudly. Danny Kowalski stood in the center of the group. He was telling a story about Tyler Vance. "So we are stuck on this moon, right? No backup, no supplies, just us and about 50 angry locals who want to eat us. And Tyler, this idiot, he looks at me and says, 'Danny, I bet I can make friends with them.' I say, 'Tyler, they are trying to kill us.' He says, 'That is just how they say hello.'" The Marines laughed. Even Katie Moreno smiled. So Tyler walks out there, hands up, biggest smile on his face. The locals stop shooting. They are confused. They have never seen anyone do this before. Tyler starts talking to them, asking about their families, their food, their music. An hour later, we are all sitting around a fire, sharing dinner. Danny's voice cracked. Tears were running down his face. But he kept smiling. "That was Tyler," he said. "He never met a stranger. He never met an enemy he could not turn into a friend. And when he could not make peace, he fought harder than anyone I have ever known, because he believed that people were worth fighting for." Danny raised his glass. "To Tyler Vance, the best of us." "To Tyler," the Marines echoed. Varekthal watched them drink. He watched them cry and laugh at the same time. He had seen grief before, in many species, but he had never seen anything like this. The humans did not try to escape their pain. They embraced it. They transformed it into something else. Something powerful. He was beginning to understand. Later that day, Varekthal visited the communications center. The technicians had been intercepting Korvathi transmissions throughout the battle. Most of it was tactical data, but some of it was different. "We found something strange," one of the technicians said. "The enemy commanders are arguing. Some of them want to retreat." Varekthal looked at the translated messages. The Korvathi language was harsh and guttural, full of clicks and hisses, but the meaning was clear. The Queen's Chosen refuse to advance. They fear the small ones. The ones who do not stop. The small ones. The ones who do not stop. They were talking about the humans. Varekthal read more. The Korvathi had conquered dozens of species. They had never encountered anything like this. Other races ran when they were losing. Other races surrendered when the fight was hopeless. But the humans kept coming. They died and still they kept coming. The enemy was afraid. Varekthal sat back and thought about what he had learned. His people had always believed that violence was a mark of primitive species. They thought that evolved beings left war behind, but maybe they were wrong. Humans did not fight because they were primitive. They fought because they chose to. They had no claws, no armor, no venom. They were small and soft and died easily. But they refused to accept death. They refused to give up. And that refusal, that stubborn, insane, beautiful refusal, was more terrifying than any natural weapon. The Korvathi were predators. They were built to kill. But humans were something else entirely. They were adapters. They took their weakness and turned it into strength. They took their fear and turned it into fire. That night, scouts reported that the Korvathi were regrouping. They would attack again soon. This time, they would commit everything. Varekthal found Katie Moreno in the tactical center. She was studying the enemy formation. Her face calm. "What is the plan?" he asked. Katie looked at him and smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who had made peace with what was coming. "We are going to make them regret coming here," she said. That night, Varekthal did not try to sleep. He sat in his quarters and wrote in his journal, trying to capture what he had learned. At 3 a.m, he heard a noise in the corridor. He opened his door and found Danny Kowalski doing push-ups on the floor. "What are you doing?" Varekthal asked. Danny grinned up at him, sweat dripping from his face. "Getting ready," he said. "Big day tomorrow, Bug Eyes. You should rest up." "I cannot sleep." "Then do push-ups. Always helps me." Varekthal looked at the human for a long moment. Then, slowly, he got down on the floor beside him. Danny laughed. "That is the spirit. Count of 10. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Varekthal struggled through the exercise, his thin arms shaking. But he did not stop. He did not give up. Maybe the humans were teaching him something after all. The Korvathi returned with 300 ships. Varekthal stood on the bridge and watched them fill the view screen. The Allied fleet had only 38 vessels left. The math was simple. The math was death. Admiral Claire Hutchinson's voice came over every speaker in the fleet. "The evacuation transports need 6 more hours to escape. We hold for 6 hours. No retreat, no surrender, no exceptions." The Velshanti officers looked at each other with despair in their eyes. One of them stepped forward. "Admiral, perhaps we should discuss terms with the enemy. Surrender might save some lives." There was a long pause. Then Admiral Hutchinson spoke again. "Lieutenant, the Korvathi do not take prisoners. They do not accept surrender. They will kill every man, woman, and child on those transports. Our only choice is to fight or watch them die. So we fight." "Any other questions?" Former. No one spoke. The battle began. Varekthal did not go to his assigned station. Instead, he went to the Marine barracks and found Lieutenant Katie Moreno. "I want to come with you," he said. Katie looked at him for a long moment. She did not ask why. She did not argue. She simply nodded and handed him a pistol. "Stay close to me," she said. "Do what I tell you, and whatever happens, do not stop moving." Danny Kowalski appeared beside them. He was carrying his rifle and his knife. His scarred face was calm. "Hey, Bug Eyes," he said. "Welcome to the party. Try not to die." The plan was insane. A small team would board the Korvathi flagship and destroy its reactor. Without the command ship, the enemy fleet would lose coordination. It might be enough to save the transports. The mission had almost no chance of success, but the humans volunteered anyway. Every single one of them. The boarding shuttle launched into hell. Enemy fire filled the space around them. Explosions lit up the darkness. Varekthal gripped his seat and tried not to scream as the pilot threw them through impossible maneuvers. Then he saw something that made his heart stop. Brooke Delgado's fighter was ahead of them. She had survived the first battle, rescued from her escape pod with a broken arm and burns across half her body. The doctors had told her to rest. She had stolen a fighter instead. Her ship was badly damaged. Smoke poured from one engine. Her weapons were gone, but she was flying straight toward the enemy flagship's hangar bay. "Brooke, what are you doing?" Katie shouted into the radio. Brooke's voice came back, crackling with static. "Clearing you a path, Lieutenant. See you on the other side." She rammed her fighter into the hangar doors. The explosion tore them open. Debris scattered into space. The boarding shuttle flew through the gap. Varekthal expected to find Brooke's body in the wreckage. Instead, he found her climbing out of her crashed fighter, her face bloody, her broken arm hanging at her side. She looked at them and grinned. "What took you so long?" The humans were insane. All of them. Completely, utterly insane. They fought their way into the ship. The corridors were dark and filled with enemies. Korvathi warriors came at them from every direction, screaming and clicking, their claws reaching for human flesh. The Marines cut through them. Varekthal stayed close to Katie, firing his pistol at anything that moved. His hands were shaking. His aim was terrible. But he kept shooting. He kept moving. He did not stop. Around him, Marines fell. He saw a young man take a blade through the chest. He saw a woman dragged down by 3 Korvathi, still fighting as they killed her. He saw death after death after death. But the humans did not break. They fought harder. Danny Kowalski was everywhere. He moved like a ghost, appearing where the fighting was thickest, killing with his knife when his rifle ran dry. He was covered in blood, human and alien, and he was smiling. Come on, he shouted. "Is that all you have? My grandmother hits harder than you." They reached the reactor chamber. Only 6 Marines were still standing. Danny had taken a blade to the leg. Katie had been stabbed through the shoulder. Brooke could barely walk. The reactor was ahead of them, a massive sphere of pulsing energy. One explosion would destroy it, cripple the ship, and give the Allied fleet a chance. But the Korvathi were right behind them. Hundreds of them, filling the corridor, cutting off any escape. Danny looked at the reactor. He looked at the explosives on his belt. He looked at his friends. "Get to the escape pods," he said. "I will handle this." "No," Katie said. "We go together. Someone has to trigger the charge manually. The timer is broken." Danny smiled. "Besides, you know I am the best at blowing things up." "Danny." He grabbed her and hugged her tight. Then he pushed her toward the escape pods. "Take care of Bug Eyes for me," he said. "Make sure he gets home." Then he turned and walked toward the enemy. Varekthal wanted to stop him. He wanted to say something, do something, change what was happening. But Katie grabbed his arm and pulled him toward the pods. "Move," she said. Her voice was breaking. "Move now." They ran. Behind them, Varekthal heard gunfire. He heard Danny's voice, shouting insults at the enemy. "Come on, you ugly bugs. Come and get me. I have been waiting for this all my life." They reached the escape pods. Katie shoved Varekthal inside. Brooke collapsed into a seat. The other Marines followed. The pod launched. Through the viewport, Varekthal could see the Korvathi flagship growing smaller. Then he saw Danny Kowalski. The human was standing in the corridor outside the reactor. The Korvathi surrounded him. A wall of claws and teeth. He was out of ammunition. He was badly hurt. He was going to die. And he was laughing. Varekthal watched as Danny raised his hand. He was holding the detonator. "Hey, Bugs," Danny said. "Want to see a magic trick?" He pressed the button. The flagship exploded. The reactor went first, a blinding flash of light. And then, the chain reaction spread through the entire vessel. The massive ship tore itself apart in seconds. The escape pod rocked from the shockwave. Alarms screamed. But they were alive. They had made it. Katie Moreno sat very still, staring at the burning wreckage where Danny Kowalski had died. She did not cry. She did not scream. She just looked at the fire and said, softly, "Goodbye, you beautiful idiot." The Corvathi fleet broke apart without their command ship. The Allied vessels pushed forward for the first time. The evacuation transports escaped. 40,000 refugees survived. Varric Thal sat in the escape pod and looked at his hands. They were covered in blood. Alien and human. He did not know whose he had killed today. He had taken lives for the first time in 300 years. He had become something he never thought he could be. And somewhere, far behind them, a human named Danny Kowalski had died laughing. Varric Thal did not understand. He was not sure he ever would. But he knew one thing for certain. He would never forget. 3 months passed. The Corvathi Dominion had retreated from the sector. Without their flagship and their best commanders, they had lost their appetite for conquest. At least for now. The refugees were safe. The war was over. Varric Thal returned to his people. But he no longer felt like one of them. He walked through the halls of the Velshanti Council building, listening to the elders speak of peace and healing. They talked about moving forward, about rebuilding their society, about returning to the quiet contemplation that had defined their species for millennia. He understood the words. But they felt hollow. At night, he still dreamed of fire and blood. He still saw Danny Kowalski standing in that corridor, laughing as death came for him. He still felt the weight of the pistol in his hand, the kick of the weapon as he fired. He had become something new, something his people had no word for. The Galactic Council held a ceremony to honor the Allied forces. Representatives from a dozen species gathered in a great hall, dressed in their finest clothes, speaking polished words about sacrifice and courage. The humans received the highest commendation the Council could offer. Admiral Claire Hutchinson accepted the award with a simple nod. She did not smile. She did not make a speech. She just took the medal and walked away. Lieutenant Katie Moreno attended the ceremony with her arm still in a sling. She wore her dress uniform. The fabric stretched tight over the bandages on her shoulder. Beside her stood Brooke Delgado, her burns still healing, her broken arm in a cast. They did not look like heroes. They looked tired, sad, and older than their years. Danny Kowalski received a posthumous citation. A small gold medal that meant nothing to the man who had earned it. Katie accepted it on his behalf. Her hand shook as she took it. Varric Thal was invited to speak at the ceremony. His government wanted him to talk about the alliance, about cooperation between species, about the bright future ahead. He declined. After the ceremony, he found Katie standing alone on an observation deck. She was looking at the stars, just like she had been the first night they talked. The medal for Danny Kowalski was clutched in her hand. Varric Thal joined her. They stood together in silence. "How do you do it?" he finally asked. "How do you carry this?" Katie did not look at him. "You just do," she said. "One day at a time. You remember them. You honor them. And you keep going, because that is what they would want. I do not know if I can." "You can." Katie turned to face him. Her eyes were gentle. "I watched you, Varric Thal. In that ship, when everything was falling apart, you did not run. You did not freeze. You fought. You saved lives. I killed. Yes. And it hurts. It should hurt. The day it stops hurting is the day you lose yourself." She put her hand on his arm. "But you are not lost. You are just changed. That is okay. That is how we survive." Varric Thal thought about her words. He thought about everything he had seen. "Your people are terrifying," he said. Katie smiled. "I know. You are small and weak. You have no claws, no armor, no venom. You die from sicknesses that other species cure with basic medicine. But you are the most dangerous beings I have ever encountered. Is that a compliment? I do not know. Varekthal paused. I think it might be. They stood together for a while longer. Then Katie held out her hand. Varekthal looked at it. In his culture, physical contact between strangers was considered intimate, almost sacred. He had never touched a human on purpose before. He took her hand. Her grip was warm and firm. He could feel the calluses on her palm, the strength in her fingers. She was small and fragile, and could die from 100 things that would not even scratch a Velshanti, but she had survived. She had fought. She had won. Thank you, he said, for teaching me. You taught yourself, Katie replied. We just showed you what was possible. She let go of his hand and walked away. Varekthal watched her disappear into the crowd. That night, he returned to his quarters. His government had asked him to write a report about humanity. They wanted to know if the humans were a threat to galactic stability. He sat at his desk and opened his personal journal. He had been keeping notes throughout his time with the humans. Now he had to decide what to write. The official report was easy. He wrote that humans were valuable allies who should be cultivated. He wrote that they were loyal, brave, and effective in combat. He wrote that they posed no threat to the Velshanti. All of this was true. But it was not the whole truth. He deleted the official report and started again. To any Velshanti who reads this in the centuries to come, he wrote, if you ever face extinction, if you ever stand at the edge of annihilation, there is one species you must seek as allies. They are small, fragile, short-lived, and utterly unremarkable by galactic standards. They cannot read minds. They have no natural armor. They die from ailments that other species cure with basic medicine. But they will fight for you. They will die for you. And if you are very lucky, they will teach you to fight for yourself. I know this because I was there. I fought alongside humanity. And the true horror I found was not in the enemy we faced. It was in the reflection I saw when I looked in the mirror. I saw a being capable of violence, a being capable of killing, a being who could look death in the face and keep moving forward. I had become something new, something that could survive. The humans have a word for it. They call it courage. I am still learning what it means. Varekthal closed his journal and looked out the window. The stars were bright and cold, scattered across the darkness like diamonds on black velvet. Somewhere out there, the Korvathi were waiting. Other enemies were growing strong. The galaxy was full of dangers, but it was also full of humans. He thought about Danny Kowalski, dying with a smile on his face. He thought about Katie Moreno, standing tall despite her wounds. He thought about Brooke Delgado, flying a broken ship into the mouth of hell. He thought about Tyler Vance, falling to his death while still fighting. These were not monsters. These were people who had chosen to stand between the darkness and the innocent. They had paid for that choice with blood and pain and death, and they would do it again. Varekthal knew that now. No matter how many times they fell, the humans would always get back up. They would always keep fighting. That was what made them terrifying. And that was what made them beautiful. Varekthal looked at his reflection in the window. He saw a changed being looking back at him. He was not the same creature who had boarded the Quiet Dawn all those months ago. He never would be again. For the first time in 3 months, he smiled. Maybe that was okay. Maybe change was not something to fear. Maybe it was something to embrace. The humans had taught him that. He turned away from the window and began to plan for the future. There was work to do. There were people to protect. And somewhere in the galaxy, there were humans who might need his help. He would be ready.